That the motion be agreed to. Call Jacinda Ardern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to be able to follow the Minister and just flesh out some of the accusations, for want of a better word, that were made about this side of the House and the way that they have approached the legislation he has brought before us. Now, the take-home message overall from Labor, obviously, given that we are supporting the bill, is that, of course, no one on this side of the House believes that we should ever condone or facilitate or allow individuals to defraud the welfare state. Now, it's an incredibly important principle for Labor because we don't want anything to undermine the importance of social security in New Zealand. We established it, we believe in it, we worry, however, that the language that sits around the welfare state has slowly chipped away at New Zealanders' notion of what it is and who it is there to serve. And our concern has been that the continual approach that we should generally assume as a first principle that most people on social security potentially don't need to be there or are abusing it in some form erodes the very purpose of that safety net in the first place. And that is the kind of language we hear from that side of the House all of the time. And so that is why we generally approach proposals like this with a very sceptical eye, because we want to do everything we can to prevent fraud, yes, but will it be the overwhelming way in which we frame and discuss social security? No, because overwhelmingly people who access it are not defrauding it. They're in genuine need. But every time the front agenda about welfare is about fraud or is about the Minister's social obligations, which we want to recap the last changes that Minister Bennett made to the welfare state. It was to say you can have it docked if you don't enrol your child in school, if you don't have your well child checks for your child, if you are running from the law, or if you fail a drug test. Now, look, in and of its own right, some of those may have some merit to them. But what message does it send New Zealand? What message does it send New Zealand if the only time we hear the government talking about social security is to say that people who are on it are potentially running from the law, smoking dope and not enrolling their children in school? And oh, by the way, they're probably defrauding it as well. No wonder we're a bit cynical every time the government raises proposals, because that's the context in which they talk about social security. So, Mr. Speaker, yes, we want to prevent fraud, but no, it is not our overwhelming perception that that is what the biggest issue facing social security. And we have raised welfare fraud in the context of tax fraud, rightly so. The scale of tax fraud in New Zealand should cause all New Zealanders concern and should be fought with the same vigour of those who defraud the welfare state. But there is a difference. Relationship fraud in New Zealand costs us about $20 million as taxpayers. We should pursue that. Tax fraud, tax discrepancies amount to $1.2 billion a year. That's an estimate, as close as we can establish. Annual tax fraud, the established fraud that we know about, is $141 million at an absolute minimum. Yes, we will call on the government to do more about tax fraud, because from as far as we're concerned, they spend far less time in this House talking about what is a much more costly problem. And Victoria University, I think, has done us a great favour in raising to the fore that tax evasion is up to 150 times more likely than benefit fraud. And that also, IRD is more likely to write off what could be considered fraud or discrepancies than they are for benefit fraud. And yet the dollar values attached to each are often significantly different, a much higher value often written off in the tax domain. So yes, we will raise it, and we'll keep raising it because we think it's a valid point. And we will raise it in the context of the way that these changes work too, because what the Minister has ultimately done has changed the threshold for when a partner can be brought into relationship fraud. And I think it's fair to ask, if we're going to change the threshold of knowledge or even the test for benefit fraud, why don't we for tax fraud? Where clearly tax fraud occurs, it often benefits a spouse. It can certainly raise questions in a household, you could argue a partner ought to have known that tax fraud was occurring. That's the test we're introducing for welfare fraud. Why are we not introducing it, Mr. Speaker, for tax fraud as well? In fact, we sought for this bill to be able to consider that extension of a tax fraud all in one go. Unfortunately, my understanding is that it was a request that was turned down. I think my time's about to expire. I look forward to coming back and sharing my further views in the remainder of the day. Oh, you're not going to stand up. I'll just keep going. Just to go into a little more detail on the test that the Minister was talking about, where he claimed that we weren't doing anything particularly new.
Sorry to interrupt the honourable member. The time has come for me to leave the chair for the dinner break. This debate is interrupted. I shall resume the chair at 7:30.